Hello and welcome to episode 198 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. Today, Maz will be joining me once again to finish our Epcot tier list from last week. We've already gone from Spaceship Earth and to the right through the seas, land, and we are now on the Imagination Pavilion. Before we get started, like, comment, and subscribe to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. We are going to try to continue to build this thing as we approach 200 episodes in just 2 weeks. Right now, let's get things started. Thanks for being here, Maz.
Awesome to be back.
Now, it is a very, very popular character on a ride that if it was any other character would be an F tier. But because people have that nostalgia for Figment, they have that love for Figment, I do think it's sitting around C tier. Is that too low?
That's what I was thinking. I think that, like you said, the character is so beloved that it's hard not to feel swayed by that. But the ride itself, it's needed some updates for a long time. And it's needed maybe an overhaul for a while as well. I feel like it's especially compared to what it was, which I know is kind of unfair because we do have to judge it in its current iteration, but it's just not the ride it could be, which is disappointing. But I will say, when I rode this as a kid, my whole family was obsessed with it. Like, my sister and I, as young under 10-year-olds, were like singing One Little Spark for the rest of our trip. And like our big souvenir that we chose was a Figment mouse pad. Like, big deal for us. So it does have some charm still to it, I think, but yeah, it's not what it could be.
Okay, first of all, do you still have the Figment mouse pad?
I do.
All right.
I'll find a picture of it.
You're going to have to post that on Twitter here sometime soon. When I think about this ride, I think Disney is so stuck and they have no idea what they want to do with it, because I think part of them wants to just make it an inside out ride and do that, but they know they can't get rid of Figment. They make too much money on Figment to turn it into another intellectual property, but I don't think they're sold enough on Figment to just go through a big refurb and make this the ride that Figment deserves. I think it is in such a no man's land, and they just put so much money into Epcot that I don't know if we're ever going to get this as anything more than a cheap version of something that used to be great.
Yeah, I feel like with Test Track comes the end of their planned Epcot refurbs for a while. And I kind of worry that they're just going to let this go as long as they possibly can. And then it's just going to become something else, whether that's Inside Out or by the time they finally decide to do that 10, 15 years from now, it could be a totally new thing that we have no idea even exists yet. But I do kind of think that even though it deserves better, this is what it will. This is the legacy Figment will get in the parks.
In 20 years, it'll be Pixar's Beavers or something, whatever that new movie that they have coming out soon. Pixar's Beavers, or I don't. Is that what it's called? Right?
It's something like that. Yeah, I think it might be.
All right, now we are going to move into World Showcase, and I'm guessing this is the second one here after Awesome Planet that you probably haven't done yet, right?
Yeah, I did the old version, but I haven't made it to the new version yet.
So a few years ago, O Canada, which featured Martin Short and was kind of funny, was the Canada movie. And now they have replaced it with Canada Far and Wide, where they took two famous comedians and had them decide to just not be funny. So that was an interesting decision by Disney there. So it's voiced by Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, and they really aren't funny for it. It's okay. Like, I think the thing that you want out of these attractions is if you're seeing a movie about a country, it should make you want to visit that country. And it does do that. However, I think the old version was better. And even though Martin Short's a little goofy for me, I know a lot of people really, really love him. I did think it was funny. It talked about some famous Canadians. So, like, I got to see Alanis Morissette, who's one of my favorite musicians. Like, they mention her in it. I think there's a really weird part in Canada Far and Wide because of when they made it, that they bring up the fact that the Toronto Raptors won the NBA championship, which is such a random thing that if they would have made this movie at any other time, never would have gotten mentioned. It just happened to happen while they were doing this film. And that's weird. I'm going to give it a C, I think. I just, it's okay. It's fine. It's fine.
I'll say this about it. I love Martin Short. I love Eugene Levy. I love Catherine O'Hara. I think they're all icons of comedy. When multiple people started telling me, multiple people whose opinions I value, let's make that clear, whose opinions I respect and I think, I gel with, started telling me that they made Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara somehow unfunny, it really kind of zapped all of my desire to go see it, because I was like, well, I really like them and I don't really need to go see them not be comedians in something where they're like trying to and the script is preventing them from being comedic. So that's why I've kind of skipped it.
Do you remember the episode of Frasier where Frasier's trying to get a job as one of the announcers for the holiday parade?
Yes.
And he sits down with the woman who's done the holiday parade for years. And he wrote this, little cheesy little script, and she's reading it. And at one point she takes off her glasses and goes, "That's good banter." Like, I see the people who wrote this script saying that. Like, it's that cheesy kind of not funny, but slightly smirking kind of comedy that you would get in something like a parade where they would just make these like observations. When you have two comedians like Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, you don't want just regular parade banter. It's so silly.
Yeah, it's like, why book them if you're not going to let them use their talents to the fullest? Like, why are you wasting them?
Remy's Ratatouille Adventure. We're getting to a new ride. We've now had this long enough, like 3 years now it's been. We've had it long enough to make a judgment. What are you thinking?
I feel like this is maybe a B for me. I think it's a pretty popular, well-liked ride. I don't really have anything against it other than the fact that I feel like it's cute, but there's not much that really like pulls me to reride it. I also think that some of the 3D isn't like that well done, which is kind of frustrating. And I know that as someone who wears glasses, like the 3D isn't going to be perfect to begin with, but it's a little off more than it usually is for me. Yeah, I think it's a fun ride, but I don't think that it, for me, necessarily warrants the lines that it gets.
That is my point. This is still a ride, even after all those years, that will put up like 80-minute waits. And it's fine, but this is a ride that should have a 25-minute wait at max. It's kind of inconsistent. It's another one of those rides that breaks down kind of frequently. The screens, like you said, for a brand new ride should have better 3D. It shouldn't look as choppy as it looks. I don't think the story's all that clear for a lot of the people who are just visiting and just, I want to get on this ride and then this ride and then this ride. I think some of the other rides explain a little better. I do like that whole new area of the park. I'm glad that they built out instead of replacing something in the middle of the France Pavilion. So because it doesn't really impact anything that negatively, I guess I'll go with a B as well. But I could have very easily made this a C.
Yeah, I do agree with that, and I think that if it had a consistent, like, 25-minute wait, I would ride it a lot more. But when, I go to the park and it's at 75, 80 minutes all day long, it's like, okay, it's just not worth it to me.
It's not Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, right? Like, it
Correct.
is a ride that should not have that kind of weight. The Beauty and the Beast sing along. I pray to sweet baby Jesus you've never done this.
I haven't.
This is the most clear F tier attraction that we will cover until we do Magic Kingdom and we get to this. Well, we'll talk about that later. I hate this. And I like the Frozen sing along over at Disney's Hollywood Studios. I understand that it's for kids and it has an audience that's not necessarily me. This is just awful. They changed the story of Beauty and the Beast because, yeah, if there was anything that needs changing, it's the story to the Beauty and the Beast because that wasn't a perfect story to begin with, right? And here's the other thing, it cuts into the time that we will get the other video in France, and that is Impressions de France. Have you done Impressions de France?
I did, but it was a while ago, so I don't really remember it.
Okay. Impressions de France is a film. Like, they made a movie. And every time I see Impressions de France, I'm like wanting to drive to MCO and get on a plane and go to Paris. Like, this has me wanting to. And you know what? Like, a lot of the France Pavilion is criticized for being too much about Paris. But this movie shows you all of France and it makes you want to see all of France. It makes you want to go to the French Riviera. It makes you want to see Mont Saint Michel. Like, my bucket list, the things I want to do before I die, looks different because I've seen Impressions de France than it would if I hadn't seen it. It is the perfect movie for one of these World Showcase pavilions. I'm giving it an A. I don't care. I would probably give it an S tier, but to do that, you would have to have seen it more recently and give me a little backup on it.
I'll give it an A. I'll join in.
It is so good. It's only showing now at the very beginning of the day and the very end of the day. If you get a chance to do it, those are times when it's kind of nice to get off your feet a little bit. You know, maybe go see one of the later showings and then get ready for Luminous, A Story of Us. You know, get your spot for the fireworks. I'm going to move over to the American Adventure. This show, I find even some hardcore Disney adult nerds haven't seen it.
I would be one of those.
Okay. Wow. There's a mutual of ours on Twitter, Ken, and I showed him this for the first time, and I couldn't believe that he had never seen it. I'm kind of surprised you haven't. Although, it does take like 45 minutes out of your day, which is a big chunk of time in World Showcase. However, it's exactly halfway through World Showcase where if you ever need to sit in air conditioning for 45 minutes, that's when you need it. There are parts of this show that are so incredibly outdated and almost borderlining insensitive that I'm not going to be able to give it an A. But the animatronics are very, very impressive. They do a good job. They do a good job of trying to incorporate not just white men in the history of the United States. Frederick Douglass has an animatronic. Susan B. Anthony has an animatronic. Chief Joseph has an animatronic. However, when they have the song Two Brothers talking about the Civil War, and it's two brothers, each of them fight for different sides in the Civil War, and they say one was gentle and one was kind. The one who fought for the South was neither gentle nor kind. I have to tell you that.
Yeah.
And the end, America, spread your golden wings and fly should be the most manifest destiny. Somebody with my particular political opinions should hate this song so much. But for some reason, the way they do it, and they show clips of actual Americans, like it's not Hall of Presidents. Maybe they show one or two presidents, but really it's like they're showing Bob Dylan and LeBron James and Beyonce, and they're showing people, Jim Henson and George Lucas. They're showing people who had an impact on the United States, who are regular people who went on to do great things. I do think they're going to have to go back, and that part that has Elon Musk on it, please take Elon Musk out of this. But besides that, I should hate this. But I love it, and I kind of get that. One time I saw Eddie Vedder in concert, and he talked about, it was in D.C., and he talked about he was stand-up paddleboarding on the Potomac. And he came up to the Jefferson Memorial, and an eagle actually flew and landed on top of the Jefferson Memorial. And he just said, it was kind of that good kind of patriotism, that just like, oh wow, America kind of thing. And I do like it for that. I think I will give it a B, but I can't put it lower than a B because it has so many animatronics. And I think if they just made one or two changes to this to make it a little more sensitive, I think they could knock it out of the park with this one.
Yeah, so a large reason of why I haven't seen it is because it is so long. And that's just hard for me to do, especially, not at like the very beginning of the day. But as someone who hasn't seen it, but has spent a lot of time listening to like park music in various places, that song is, it is so good. I've never seen the ride, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I can hear it in my head. It gets stuck in my head from time to time, just completely randomly.
If you're
It's a
on
great
hold
song.
with Disney, they play it a lot. It's in that loop with grim grinning ghosts, and it always makes me laugh when I hear it there because I'm like, wow, like out of context without that video, it sounds very like, glory to the dear leader, but
Yeah.
it is it's
But
a
it
good
is
song. It's fun. I like it. I like the attraction. Now I'm a history nerd too. So I like when, we talk about history, even if it's not 100% accurate, There's also a point where the Benjamin Franklin animatronic walks. And that's almost like breathtaking when you see the animatronic walk and you realize how long this has been there. So I'm going to give it a B. I know a lot of people will have it ranked lower than that. Reflections of China. Have you done Reflections of China?
That's another one that I've done a long time ago, but I feel like I remember it slightly more. So I feel like that means I have to give it a slightly better ranking because it made some sort of impression on me.
So here's the problem with Reflections of China. They were planning on doing a brand new version of this. It was supposed to be completely 360, so there weren't even going to be the bars in between the screens like you get at Canada Far and Wide. It was just going to be a complete 360. They were going to change the story around. The story, I think, is a little cheesy where they have an old poet from one of the dynasties way back in China's history sort of explain the places to you. And he's just, I don't know, a little goofy. Like he makes some bad jokes, almost like the ones they have in Canada Far and Wide. I think the new version is not going to reference Tiananmen Square quite as much as the current version mentions it. But I do think that it does a good job of taking a highly politicized country where we get a lot of anti-China propaganda on a very steady basis, and they just break it down and they say, here are some of the amazing things about China. Here's some of the amazing things being done by the people of China. I like when these focus more on the people than they focus on the country itself. And I think this one does a really good job of that. It spends a lot less time talking about the country than they spend in Canada far and wide talking about Niagara Falls, for example. Like, they talk about the people a lot, and I do really like that. I just think it's about time that they get the new version in there. I'm going to give this a C, and we're going to move on to Mexico and Gran Fiesta Tour.
I'm back. This one I have done multiple times. And I feel like I'm going to get kicked right back out again once I give my ranking of it, which I would give it a C, which I know is not popular. I know. I know. A lot of people love this ride and I get it. I do. But I I think it needs some updates. I think it needs some changes. I love Donald Duck. Like, Donald Duck's my boy. And I just feel like, they could just do a little more with it now. If they could just refresh it, it could be really, really, really good. And you're just seeing the wear and tear a bit now, which I don't love. Also, last time I was in Epcot, okay, usually this ride is like a short wait. I feel like it's become a cult classic lately to where people are like really lining up for it. The last time I was in Epcot, the line for this ride was outside the pyramid. It was outside the front of the pyramid, which is absurd. I would never recommend anyone wait that long for this ride. And so I think that it's another one where the return on investment is not great if you're waiting longer than like 20 minutes for it. Okay, now you can kick me off and banish me to
No, because I think
Neverwhere
you
forever.
changed my mind here. I think you changed my ranking of it because I was going to rank it as far as it being a ride that usually has a 5-minute wait. But you are right. There are times where this gets a really, really high wait time. It'll especially get that high wait time around like 11 o'clock when they start opening the tequila bar and people start their drinking around the world because everybody likes to start in Mexico for that. And you know what? Like, if I have to wait 10, 15 minutes for this, it's not worth it. If I have to wait 5 minutes, sure, it is worth it. And I did like the old version before they incorporated the three caballeros. Some of the incorporation is cheesy, like when there's just a video of the restaurant and it doesn't feel like it's part of the actual story. That's a little weird. I do love the final scene. Nobody will ever be able to change my mind about the final scene with the animatronics, and it has that really cool Mexican appearance. I think the one thing that I will say is I don't want to rate this too low because I think if we do, it will be Coco in 2 weeks. But I will go with a C as well. Test Track, and we are going to be judging Test Track 2.0, even though they are going to be turning it into Test Track 3.0. But that will not happen before we air this episode. So let's just go by the last version of Test Track.
Okay, so this is another one that I'm going to get kicked out for. I would give it somewhere between a C or a D, which I know sounds harsh. I know it sounds harsh, but like I think objectively it is a better ride than that. Okay, hold on. Objectively, it's probably a B ride. For me personally, it's probably a D ride. So maybe I split the difference and I go with a C. But I think in general, park goer terms, it is a B attraction. It's hugely popular, always has a healthy wait. People always want to do it. That outside ride portion where you go super fast is super fun, and you can't take that away from the ride. So B is probably a fair objective ranking. For me personally, there are a lot of things, basically everything else about the ride I dislike. I hate the queue. I think it's one of the worst queues, and the queue itself has prevented me from riding it, even the lightning lane. That's a me issue. I know that. Making your own cars is fun in theory, but like 50% of the time they don't work. So, like, you spend all this time in this room that you're locked in, being like, "Oh, let's customize our car, blah, 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 blah." You spend all your time, you put all this work into it because 'cause you've got, like, 20 minutes in that room for whatever reason, and then you get on the ride, and it gives you some, like, generic output car because it didn't pick up on you scanning your Magic Band. So that kinda depletes, like, half the purpose of 2.0. I think the rest of the purpose of 2.0 is probably why they're retheming it now that Tron is open, and that's it basically feels like Tron as a car ride, where you're, like, in the car, it's just, like, some neon lights, and you're going through a dark, and, "Oh, now you stop," and then you're going through a dark, and there's a neon light, "Oh, no, now it's bumpy," and then you go outside, and you're like, "Oh, that's the ride I wanted." You spend the whole ride waiting to get to the 12 seconds you're going 65 miles an hour outside.
This ride is a D attraction that has a minute of B attraction. Like, so much of it is so bad. And then that one part that's good is so good that it gets people to overlook the rest of it. So I'm hoping that when we revisit this in the future, that Test Track 3.0 is going to maybe be a little more World of Motion at the beginning, the ride that was there before Test Track. And then they just keep that 1 minute that you're outside and you get up to 65 miles an hour and it's a little bit of a thrill ride. If they could make this more of a dark ride followed by a little bit of a thrill, that would be perfect. But as it stands now, I do agree with you. I think the other parts are so bad that I would make it a C, and I do think that is being a little generous, honestly.
Okay, whew, let me
And the
wipe my brow
line
there.
and the queue is always incredibly long, and it breaks down when there's weather. I mean, it doesn't break down. They can't do it when it's raining. So you shut it down so many times during the day, which then means when they reopen it, everybody with a lightning lane or a return time or whatever is coming at the same time. It's slowing down the standby line. There are a lot of different logistical reasons that this is a worse ride than the 1 minute that is really fun and exciting. I want to get through 3 of these things really, really quickly, and then we're going to talk about the one ride that I think we're both going to agree and fawn over a little bit. So, Mission Space Green. I am going to give it a C because it takes a ride that is too intense for most people on Orange, and it gives people at least a chance to do it. I wouldn't mind giving it a D. Do you want to give it a D?
Yeah, let's give it a D. Let's be mean.
Okay, let's be mean to it. It is kind of a little bit of a crappy ride, but I'm then going to give Mission Space Orange a D too, I think, because it's too intense for the enjoyment level.
Yeah.
This is something that I used to like when it first opened, but now I think it's run its course. And I think if there's anything that really needs to change at Epcot, it's probably Mission Space at some point. You've seen Luminous, A Symphony of Us. I have not actually stayed at Epcot late enough to see that yet. So what do you think of it?
I would give it a high B. I think it's a lot of fun. It's a great show. I don't think the story is as cohesive as Harmonious was. I don't think it's as good of a show as that was. I think it blows Epcot Forever out of the water. That's for sure. I think a really nice pro to Luminous is that you really can watch it from anywhere around the World Showcase Lagoon and get an equally good experience, which I do really appreciate. I think that helps spread the crowds out a little more and helps you be able to find a last minute spot a little bit easier. I think it's a very good show. I don't think it's like the best they've done.
I did like Harmonious a lot. I do feel, though, that you did have to be in one of 2 spots to enjoy it. You had to be staring right into, as my friend Jeff put it, the unblinking eye of Harmonious. And if you saw it like dead on from the middle, it was really, really good. Now we'll wrap things up with Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. I think we're just going to gush over this one. Is it going to be the only other S tier in Epcot? Is that what you're thinking?
I think so. I think it deserves it.
Okay, I'm going to give the only negative to it. And that's it
Are we gonna
has
have
the
the same one?
same problem as Soarin', and has the same problem as Mission Space we didn't really address. Test Track has this problem. The pre-show is too long. And then after the pre-show, when they funnel everybody together, that is an anxiety attack that I'm having right now just thinking about it.
Yep, 100%. There was a moment in time when I had bought a like individual lightning lane fort on my trip. I had bought 2 of them, and I did one of them, and it was so miserable in that second pre-show room trying to get through that funnel that I almost like didn't even do the other individual lightning lane because I was like, that was genuinely just a miserable experience of everyone shoving and pushing and people getting separated, and it doesn't resolve until you're so much further down the line. That's a huge problem. And I think if they could solve that, I would put switchbacks in that room so you have to kind of stay in a line and you don't get to just kind of stand wherever you want. I think that would help. Or they just call it and they run the show continuously and then let people who want to just walk right on through. Um, I think they have to do something though because that pre-show is miserable. But the rest of the ride makes up for it.
The actual ride itself is almost perfect. You get a different song every time or almost every time. They rotate songs, so it gives you that re-rideability. Now, if they would drop the boarding group stuff, then you could ride it multiple times in a day, which would be even better, because I do think if there's any ride in Walt Disney World that is set up for multiple rides in a day, it is Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. It's fun. It is thrilling. Now, some people do have motion sickness issues. Luckily, we don't have that problem. So I would say this is a ride that I genuinely love, except for the pre-show.
Yeah, this is a ride that honestly, just on the ride alone, is in my top 3 at the entirety of Walt Disney World. I think it is a fantastic coaster. It blends, the traditional coaster track with the modern spinning of the cars, and you get the fun songs. And, there is a screen, but I honestly can't tell you anything that's happened on it because I've never paid attention to it because I'm too busy looking at the lights that look like stars and feeling like I'm floating through space. And I said the first time I got off this ride, that as a former child with astronaut dreams, this is like the closest I'm ever going to get to floating through space on my own. And it's just such a cool experience that if you don't have motion sickness problems, I think you absolutely have to make it a priority to ride.
They really did knock it out of the park with this one, and I'm kind of surprised because I will say things like this. Like, I've never seen the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, right? And I can still enjoy this ride. Now, it's probably part of the reason that I really don't enjoy the pre-shows because I don't know what's going on with any of those people or creatures or whatever. I do think we should have gotten a rocket animatronic like they have over at Mission Breakout in Disneyland or Disney's California Adventure. It would have been really cool if we would have gotten at least an animatronic in that pre-show, which would give people a reason to not just huddle by the exits when they know that it is time to move on to the next level. Listen, you're not saving that much time by doing that. Just enjoy it and sit back. Let everybody crush each other to save an extra 5 minutes. You can make that time up later in your day. But yeah, great attraction. I don't have a problem making this an S tier. In an S tier park that is Epcot. Just to quickly go over, this is what I have down. Maz's might have been just a tiny bit different. I don't know where we diverge. Spaceship Earth, A. Turtle Talk with Crush. B, The Seas with Nemo and Friends. D, Moana Journey of Water. A, Living with the Land. S, Awesome Planet. D, Soarin' and Journey into Imagination with Figment, as well as Canada Far and Wide, all C's. Remy's Ratatouille Adventure. B, Beauty and the Beast Sing-Along, biggest F of all time. Impressions de France. A, bordering on C. American Adventure. B. Then we have 3 C's in a row, Reflections of China. Grand Fiesta Tour Test Track. We're given both versions of Mission Space. D's, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. S tier. And Luminous, A Symphony of Us. B. Maz, thank you so much for joining us. It was a blast.
Thanks for having me. This was a ton of fun.
All right, be honest. Did you catch it? What the heck were we thinking? How did we forget to rank Frozen Ever After? Major fail for Maz and me. Listen, I didn't get the chance to check in with her, but I would have to say that Frozen Ever After is a B attraction in Epcot. It's iconic because it is such a popular IP, but the line is always excruciating. The ride breaks down more than almost any other ride on property. The animatronics with the computer-generated faces are already outdated, especially when you compare it to the Frozen rides we are starting to see overseas. And adding Frozen to the Norway Pavilion has already messed with the dynamics of that pavilion. Honestly, a B might be pretty generous, but I will say that this is definitely a ride we like to do as much as possible, so I am sticking with the B. This has been episode 198 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. 2 weeks from today, we'll be celebrating our 200th episode, and next Thursday, we'll have another brand new episode of the show. Until then, have a great week.